For those of you who don't know, the Atheist Experience is a call-in show that's existed for a very long time. Matt Dillahunty has been one of the hosts of the show for about 14 years, and the show had a deep impact on me when I was leaving religion. I had the opportunity to hang out with Matt at a convention last year. He had some tequila he let me try. We didn't have any glasses to drink from, so he had me take a sip from the bottle. His lip germs touched my lip germs. We basically kissed, no big deal. Anyways, I decided to ask him if he'd come on the channel, and he said yes, so we had a conversation. Let's get into it. I have Matt Dillahunty here today. Thank you for coming, Matt.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
For those of you who don't know Matt, he's been a part of the ACA for like decades, right? And you've been on the Atheist Experience, a host on there for a long time. What are the things you got going on? Like, where can people find you?
Yeah, I've done the TV show for like 14 years. Right now is a bad time to ask where to find me because like mattdillahunty.com, it exists, but it's not currently being updated. Basically, it was something that was being run by Pangburn while we were on tour, and now I'm not doing that. Usually people can just, kind of keep an eye on my Facebook and Twitter, and I'll update. I've got several events coming up, like November. I think I'm gone 2 weekends in a row. So I'm doing the Free Flow Florida convention, and then Seth Andrews and I are doing an event in Phoenix. And then in December, I'm going to Cambridge for the 10th anniversary of the Cambridge Skeptic Society. So those things I know are there, even though they don't appear on a calendar because we haven't updated the website.
That sounds awesome. Well, like I said, really glad to have you here. And I understand that you've been a member of the ACA for a really long time, and you've been on the Atheist Experience. How did you end up there? Like, were you religious? Tell me your religious history.
Yeah, so I walked down the aisle at the Gashland Baptist Church in Kansas City, Missouri at around the age of 5 during a revival, and accepted Jesus into my little heart, and was active in the church for, I guess, all the way up until I left home at around 18. And I continued to be a believer, but I wasn't active in the church. Everybody in the church, my family, they all expected that I was going to be a preacher. As a matter of fact, at a debate I did a couple of years ago here in Austin, there was a deacon and the parents of one of my high school friends flew down from St. Louis specifically to attend a debate that I did with Mike Lacona on the resurrection. And during the Q&A, that one of them got up and said, "Hey, you may not remember me. I was a deacon at your church when you were a teenager, and we all thought you were going to go on to great things. What happened?" And I wanted to just say I went on to great things, but I decided to not be glib and gave them a better answer, kind of describing how at some point around 2000, I lost my job at Dell, and I thought it was God punishing me. I thought that, God had wanted me to be a preacher, and I basically said no and worked on my own career, and that God decided to take it all away. And so I spent a year and a half in pretty serious prayer and study and talking with minister friends of mine and my uncle who was a medical missionary and other stuff. And my roommate at the time was an atheist, and we had just been friends for years and just decided not to talk about, religion. But I realized that if I was going to get serious, I didn't want to, get to heaven and have God say, "Why is this guy who you love like a brother burning in hell because you didn't do what I told you to do?" And so I set out to try to find a way to have that conversation and potentially, convince my atheist roommate. And it backfired spectacularly. And then I wrote stuff online for a couple of years for some really crappy websites and did a lot of studying. And then I happened to live in the same apartment complex as Jeff D., who was one of the hosts on the Atheist Experience.
At the time you did?
At the time. This was 2004.
Okay.
He put a flyer up by the mailboxes, and it just happened to go out and check the mail on a Sunday, saw the flyer. Somebody at work had already told me about this show, but I had ignored them because I was like, why would I want to watch a show with a bunch of people I agree with? I want to talk to the people I don't agree with. And they said, no, it's a call-in show. You'll love it. And I blew it off. But that day I saw the flyer. I watched the show. I called into the show that day. So we can actually know exactly which day it was because there's that episode is up with me calling in. It was Ashley Perrion and Jeff D. were sitting there. I called in to mildly disagree with Jeff, I think, about something. And then they invited me to the after show dinner. I went. the next week I was in the studio screening calls, and then that led to working on the graphics and stuff behind the scenes. And a couple of months later, Jeff D was supposed to be the co-host, forgot that it was his week to do the show and didn't show up. And so Ashley looked at me and he said, "Hey, you want to go on?" And I said, "Yeah." And I went on and I talked about the Supreme Court's 10 Commandments decisions, because I just finished writing an article about that. And I went home and told my roommate, "Hey, I was on the Atheist Experience today." And he goes, "Oh, what'd you think of it?" And I said, "That's going to be my show." And I didn't mean that in the sense of I'm going to own it. I just mean this is what I'm going to do, because I get to run around and be the face of the show, and people are like, "Oh, I love your show," and I have to keep reminding people I'm just the host and currently the president, but there's a whole bunch of people who work on this, and it was around for 7 years before I got involved. So, I'm not trying to take credits for other people's work, but literally that day I knew this is what I was going to be doing, and now we're 14 and a half, 15 years later, somewhere in that neighborhood, and I don't ever want to quit.
Still going strong.
It's therapy for me. It's meditation for me. It's educational for me. It is fun. It is, I do a lot of traveling to do debates and lectures and magic shows and things like that. And every time I do that traveling and it's a weekend, which it almost always is, there's a part of me that absolutely loves the fact that I'm, going out and meeting people and doing things. And there's another part of me that's like, man, I wish I was back there so I could be doing the show today.
In the early, I think it started in 1999, didn't it, the show?
1997, I think.
I'm pretty sure I've watched every single episode, but I noticed that there are actually a lot of episodes missing from the Atheist Experience, like lost episodes, and you'll see them come out every now and then.
In the early years, it didn't stream. There wasn't YouTube or anything like that. Right. And so there are a bunch of early episodes that weren't live, and there are some episodes that are lost. I think the reason, I don't want to take the credit, but I started doing the show just about the time that YouTube started to kick up, and then we started streaming. And so the show's popularity completely changed from being a local public access show to an international kind of mild phenomenon within the atheist community.
I know it's helped a lot of people. I know it's helped me, but you were saying that you're just the host of the show. When you say that, I know you're the president of the ACA now, but you weren't always, right? Like, you were just another guy that showed up along with everybody else, just along with Don Baker and Jeff D and all of the others at one point, right? Like, how have your roles changed in the ACA over time?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, because I showed up that night that they invited me to dinner, and I was in the studio the next week, and pretty much every week that I was in town afterwards doing something. The episode where I filled in for Jeff and realized, okay, I want to do this, that led to Ashley and some others saying, hey, we should put him in the regular co-host rotation. And then Ashley needed to take a break from doing the show, and they wanted a new regular host, and I volunteered to do it. But I was so new. I'd only been, with the ACA for maybe 6 or 7 months at this point. And some of these people had been on the show for ages, and they were like, are we ready for this guy who we, have only known for a few months to come in and take over the show? And in the process, I also became like the first president of the ACA. Prior to that, we had co-chairs. We rewrote our bylaws, and I became president. And so I jumped in with both feet, took over everything, and people were warning me. They were saying, oh, don't do too much, you're going to burn out, because I was the host, the president, the librarian, doing all these other things. And here we are 14, 15 years later.
Still doing it.
I'm not burnt out, and many of them who warned me not to burn out have burnt out and left. I'm just different. But it was kind of a cautionary thing where they said, okay, what we'll do is we'll let Matt be we'll have two hosts. So for a while, when Ashley left, Russell took over for a while, and then I would fill in a little bit more until we just said, yep, Matt's the regular host of the show now. And then I was president for 7 years, and then not president for 7 years, and now I'm president again.
And that presidency, as of late, was just like a month or two ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, the elections were in May, but it was basically July when we made the change.
A few months. Interesting. Did you ever expect yourself to be here when you were, say, 15 years old? Would you call yourself the most evangelical at about 15?
I think those were probably the years where I was probably in it the deepest, and certainly nothing like this would have ever crossed my mind. As a matter of fact, even the first time I filled in for Jeff D and co-hosted, I knew the show was something I wanted to do, but I wouldn't have imagined that it would. Now, granted, everybody that works at the ACA in this capacity is a volunteer, so that's not my job. But I am a full-time atheist activist and, magician sometimes as well. I was working in the tech industry. I never thought, this notion of being a professional atheist, people kept suggesting it over and over again. Why don't you just do this for a living? And I was like, where the hell's the money in it?
Right.
I got a mortgage to pay. I'd like to, have a life. So yeah, no, I didn't really imagine any of this. And it's been an incredibly gratifying surprise.
What kind of strange religious beliefs and practices did you do? I think you were Pentecostal, is that right? What was it?
I was Southern Baptist,
Oh, okay.
But on occasion we would go to the Pentecostal churches because they would have the better concerts. They would bring in Petra and Carmen and the bigger shows but most of the time I was predominantly Southern Baptist, and it was. The Southern Baptist is kind of a weird thing because the Southern Baptist Convention has its core tenets that all the churches in that convention are expected to accept. But also there's, subtle little lines that can be drawn church to church. And I think a lot of it has to do with the age of the people who are in the church. And so like the generation before me were against dancing and playing cards. Well, I grew up with a deck of cards in my hand from the age of 3. My family was never bothered by playing cards or dances. And so I danced all kinds of stuff. I did, my parents and my grandparents would teach me dances when we were at weddings and stuff like that. But also I had a break dance crew when I was, in high school. And yeah, it was kind of a newer Southern Baptist church. And I can't remember. I have to ask myself over and over again, what were my thoughts on like the conflict between evolution and creation?
Right.
And I know that I was taught the basics of evolution in school. And I know that my church found some way of meshing it to where I never felt like there was a conflict, but I could not tell you what my actual beliefs were. I sincerely think that I pretty much just accepted the science and then said, but God intervened somehow, some way that I don't know.
Usually it's kind of a polarized situation. You'll find like a small percentage of people will say actually fairly big percentage will say evolution is a lie, like 43% or something, I think, which is scary. And then you find a small segment that says it was guided by God in some way, evolution or not. And then another minority, unfortunately, says that it was just evolution as it was. So what's your take on religion now? Like, what's your view about religious people and religious ideas? Like, how do you square the two? What are your thoughts on it?
They're completely separate. I think probably one of the easiest ways to illustrate it is somebody asked me, aren't you mad at your parents and your preachers for lying to you all those years? And I've consistently said no. First of all, for me, if you're lying, that means you are knowingly attempting to deceive. And as far as I can tell, both my parents and every preacher I ever had was just honestly telling me what they believed to be true. And so instead of looking at them as the people who were misleading me, those people, my parents, those pastors, they were the people who were misled prior to me. They are just as much a victim of religious indoctrination and bad thinking as I was. Now, the point where I draw the line is, for many, many years, I've had interactions with my parents. We love each other, things are good, but there were no discussions allowed about religion, and every time it happened, it was a mess. Am I mad at them now? Only in the sense that they've had the opportunity to have the conversations. They've had some of the conversations, and they've flatly said that they are closed-minded and will not evaluate this and will not consider it because the devil is deceiving them. So I feel bad that they are still stuck there, but I am mad that they have never taken the opportunity to even try to fairly consider this. It's just they have the truth. I am deceived of Satan and I'm leading people to hell. And everything else it's like we're speaking different languages. And so I'm more mad about what they do than what they are, which is why I read my my 50th birthday, I got a card from my parents, which I read out on the show, with a lot of passive aggressive religious crap in it that was just awful. And it turned out to be, incredibly well received because people didn't realize I had to deal with this stuff and they were dealing with it too. And I was willing at that point to not continue a relationship with my parents if me putting my foot down about this was going to cause a problem. But I'm not mad at who they are or what's been done to them. I am mad about conscious decisions they've made, how they have treated people on behalf of those things. I'm getting ready to do a video, and one of the lines that I came up with for this as a way of explaining it is, you can't give someone a ticket for being an alcoholic, but you can give someone a ticket for driving while intoxicated, because one of them is an action that's separate from who you are. And so I can be very mad at the actions that they've taken and still love and care for them and not be mad at them, and actually feel pity and compassion for them, that not only were they indoctrinated the way I was, and not only did they engage in flawed thinking the way I have, they refused to take the opportunity to even consider the possibility that they might be wrong.
Yeah, I was having a discussion about something really similar to this with Chris Shelton earlier, and we were talking about how difficult it is for me to honestly blame the governing body members of Jehovah's Witnesses for some of the things that they've done, because the abuse victims became the abusers in that case. They were indoctrinated just like everybody else was. A lot of them, at the very least, grew up in the religion and believe it just like everyone else. And so, where do you lay that line of blame for people? Obviously, you have to protect society from some people. If the governing body members of Jehovah's Witnesses are violating the law or something, then they should be put in jail. Society should be protected from them. But where does that line fall with, somebody like your parents or like my mom, for example? Where does the line fall where it turns from blaming the person for acting like that and just understanding that they're an abuse victim just like everybody else here, and they just didn't find their way out? That's kind of something that I struggle with.
Yeah, and there's no easy answer. I mean, I tend to bring everything back to this notion of individual sovereignty and freedom. And so I just did a debate last month about how to resolve the conflicts between LGBTQ rights and religious liberties. And boy, there were people who were really mad that I didn't also call them religious rights. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter what you call them. At the end of the day, you have your sincere religious conviction, but that shouldn't affect other people's rights. It's not like the LGBTQ community is coming around saying, oh, we don't like straight marriage, so we're going to outlaw straight marriage. And it's the whole thing of my right to swing my fist ends actually just short of your personal space and not at your personal space. And how far, like if we all agree that it should stop before it actually hits your nose, but how far? And I think there are some people that are like, the second you raise a fist, and I'm being metaphorical here. I'm not talking about actual acts of physical violence, but the second you begin that motion, that they're justified in basically doing the equivalent of shooting you in the head in self-defense. And I can't do that. I think that there are other options. I'm not a pacifist. I'm not opposed to defending people's lives and things like that. But there's no easy way to figure out where to draw the line. But the thing that I find most frustrating is that while we're not going to have an easy answer to where to draw that line in all situations, it should be patently obvious to absolutely everybody that my personal beliefs must end before they begin to affect your life, in much the same way that your personal beliefs must end before they begin to affect mine, unless they have a powerful secular purpose that is relevant under the law. And that's probably the point where I get most frustrated, is with well-meaning people who really feel like they're so right that they get to change the world around them to fit them to the detriment of others. And I'm seriously asking people, we went through the whole marriage equality thing. Exactly how does it harm your marriage or the vows of your marriage or the sanctity of your marriage to let two men marry?
Right.
It's never made sense to me. And I think I know some of what's going on there. I think religions have built in protective mechanisms. We have this fear of not knowing. We have this fear of not being loved. We have this fear of what happens after we're dead. And religions pretend to provide answers to those things, and certainly can provide comfort. And if you begin to recognize that perhaps the best society is one where your view is not the prevalent view, that your view about how things should be doesn't impact everybody, that somewhere in the back of your head has to go, hang on, maybe that means my view isn't right. And the fear of even questioning whether or not their view might be right is so strong that it's just like, nope, this far and no further.
I've noticed a lot of the time with people, I think one of the biggest issues is people don't fail to see nuance. It's like the more extreme they get in one direction or the other, the less nuance they see, the more black and white things become. And it seems to turn into that on all sides. People start to get extreme in whatever ideas or feelings or beliefs that they have. And I think that's a huge problem that needs to be addressed. And honestly, that's been the whole idea of my channel, is trying to do that. I don't know if I'm succeeding or not, but I'm trying.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I actually gave a talk once called "Hyperbole Will Destroy the World," talking about how once people are convinced they're on the side of righteousness, all of a sudden truth and honesty and measured thinking and nuanced consideration goes right out the window, because now I'm right. There's another problem, though, which may not be as serious or as big, but I think it might be increasing. And that's those who are so desperate to see nuance in everything that they kind of get decision paralysis. Like when you go to the grocery store and there's 20 mustards to pick from, and now you can't pick, whereas if there were only 3, you could easily pick. And so if they start to see nuance in everything, and they're like, well, this is what the scientists have told us now, but that could change in a week, or how do I know this? How do I trust this source? Where's this? And the fake news. And when you get to a point you see nuance everywhere, all of a sudden you get to a point where you're advocating for subjective morality or societal morals, where people will say, well, hey, when they had slaves, that wasn't wrong because that was their society. And I think that we can say, no.
Right.
That was their society, and it was wrong. That, if you get to the point where you can't make any sort of declaration, yes, there's this massive gradient, and a bunch of stuff are going to fall on the good side of it and the bad side of it. But what they're trying to do is widen the middle, which I think should be very narrow, to weigh out like this, to say, oh, this is all equivalent, and it's just not.
You were talking about playing cards. Do you know what the justification for not using playing cards was? I know I've heard Seth Andrews say that he wasn't allowed to dance because dancing is a vertical expression of a horizontal desire, and I absolutely love that saying. It's like one of my favorite sayings now. But what's the justification for playing cards?
So dancing leads to sex, playing cards leads to gambling.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, and they're not entirely wrong, because my mother's side of the family started off Catholic. Most of them converted and were Baptist in my immediate family. But I'm not kidding. I had a deck of cards in my hand from the time I was 3 years old. There were card games going on every weekend at my grandmother's house. My grandmother, I have a picture of her in her casket from a couple of months ago when she died at 91, with a deck of cards in her hand. Because that was just iconic for our family. And we would do, I played everything, nerds, canasta, spoons, and specialist games. But the biggest game in the family was euchre. And this was a family where all the brothers and sisters and all the cousins and all the extended family would get together all the time, not just Christmas. And so we would go from one member of the family's house to another, every one Friday a month or 2 Fridays a month, and we would have a euchre tournament with a proper trophy, and there was nobody in that house, 50 people playing this game. Nobody in that house wasn't family. But you can't play games like that around people who are competitive without putting some kind of friendly wager on it at some point.
Okay.
And so they're not entirely wrong. Playing cards leads to gambling. It's just that I happen to be okay with gambling, especially if, it's a skill-based game I can win at.
I understand you're into Magic now.
I've been doing Magic since I was 3 or 4 as well, and performed off and on up until I graduated high school. And now I I have an entire stage show that's called Magic and Skepticism. Close-up magic cards and coins and rubber bands and stuff was the stuff I mostly did growing up. But I found myself where I would be on stage in front of, hundreds or thousands of people, and I'd know a trick that would illustrate a point I wanted to make about skepticism. And so a few years ago at Apostacon, I put together an entire hour-plus show on that. And then I did it at American Atheist and changed it a little bit. And then, last year we took it on tour, and I did 10 cities in Canada and 10 in the U.S. and performed with Sean Farquhar, who's the 2-time world champion of magic and a good friend of mine, Murray Hatfield, the amazing Randy. It's hard for me to pick out I'm a habitual learner, but I also have tons of hobbies, and some of them become more. And so the two things that I've kind of had as hobbies the longest and most serious are magic and pool. And granted, I don't play pool anymore because I just don't have time, but there was a period of time where I paid my rent playing pool. And magic is something that has never and will never leave. And I even, I worked the International Brotherhood of Magicians Convention in Scottsdale, Arizona a couple months ago. I did the Magic and Skepticism show on a cruise ship for the Florida Free Thought community. If you come down to Austin, it's much more difficult to get me to stop doing magic than it is to get me to start.
I think you mentioned a minute ago that your mother's side came from Catholicism. Is that right? Like, what's your family's religious history? Your mom came from Catholicism. Where was your dad from?
Baptist. My father's side of the family were all Baptist. As a matter of fact, my ancestors, one of them was one of the preachers that started one of the first 3 churches that became the Southern Baptist Convention. I come from a long line of preachers on the Dillahunty side. My mom's family was predominantly Catholic, although most of her immediate family left Catholicism in the 70s after my mom converted, and she bought them all. I have home video footage of her buying everybody a Bible and presenting it to them, and talking about this stuff. And eventually they all kind of found their way out, and my grandmother went from being a Catholic to a Baptist and stayed that way till the day she died.
Do you know if they were like second, third, fourth generation kind of religious? And also, did you see any kind of religious influence? Did you see any kind of Catholic influence in your family as a result of your mom's upbringing?
No, not in my immediate family. Actually, so at that time, the Baptist view on Catholicism is that Catholics are in a cult. They are in a Mary worshiping cult. It just happens to be the biggest cult on the planet. And I know I'm not using the word technically. I'm just saying that's the view that they had. And so that's how my mom essentially, witnessed to her family and got them out of it. Was no, that your religion is not teaching what the Bible says. And here's the Bible. And look, these extra books aren't in there. And this let's pray to Mary is not in there. That's a direct violation of, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. And there's no instruction for anybody. I didn't have any Catholic influence, despite the fact the only person in my life who was Catholic for the entire time that I knew them was my mom's grandmother. And I remember, going to her house and seeing, the crucifixes and the weird pictures of Jesus with like the lenticular lensing on it, where, he moves like dancing Jesus type thing, only serious and not funny. But it was not, I didn't have any Catholic influence. As a matter of fact, I probably had an anti-Catholic influence for most of my upbringing, because my mom was so dead set on making sure that we knew that Catholicism was not biblical and that she had, worked to help her family escape that. Now, as I got older, of course, I didn't look at Catholicism as a cult in any simple sense, just a matter of, oh wait, religion is the one that's correct and their religion is wrong. They're just doing Christianity wrong.
Right. So that's kind of how you viewed it when you were, I guess, a teenager, right? Yeah.
Yep. It was, probably the most impactful thing for me as a teenager had nothing to do with Catholicism or even being a Baptist, as much as I recognized that as I studied and learned, I would begin to understand things at 12, 13, 14 that I couldn't possibly have understood when I was 5 and walked down the aisle. And so at 5, if I truly got saved, By the time I was 13, I was convinced that I could not possibly have gotten saved at 5 because I didn't understand it. So I would get saved again. And then there's this process that I call a guilt cycle, which was common in my church and it's common with most other Southern Baptists that I talk to, which is you're constantly preaching this message that you cannot walk a proper Christ-like life. You cannot live a life that is correct and good. You will constantly fail. So it leads to this, we're Catholics, you can do stuff and then you go to confession and you jump through those hoops. Instead of confession, we would just, you go out and do stuff and then you had to turn your life around and you constantly rededicating your life over and over again. And this is what summer camp was. I went to, for anybody who's seen Jesus Camp, I went to a Christian summer camp that was not quite as political, but certainly in the same religious neighborhood as what you would see in Jesus Camp. It was Camp Windermere in Lake of the Ozarks. I loved going down there. It was fun and everything else, but the nightly services would be, hey, we know you boys and girls are out there having, impure thoughts and doing things you're not supposed to and everything. And then everybody would cry and rededicate themselves, and you'd get these teenagers who were like on the Holy Ghost kick for a little while until they spotted somebody that they were attracted to, and then all of a sudden the natural thoughts would pop into your head. And while I was never a bad kid or a terrible kid, I was not a Bible thumping do-gooder. I for the first time when I was 15 with somebody that I met at church.
Shame on you.
Yeah, I got in loads of trouble for that, even though I didn't admit to actually having sex that night. I got in trouble for driving her car without a license.
You know what? Honestly, I think it was probably a really good thing for you to do that, to kind of break out of that religious mindset at least a little bit. Before we finish up here, I just wanted to know, where can people find you one more time? You've got your website is mattdillahunty.com, and where else can they find you?
So my Facebook page is facebook.com/matt.dillahunty. I probably can add some people. I hit the limit years ago, and then as people fell off, I just opened my Facebook page up. Every now and then I'll shut it down where, if something super contentious is going on. But by and large, facebook.com/matt.dillahunty is probably the best place to find stuff. I tend to post all the events and everything that I'm doing. But you can also just Google Matt Dillahunty. And the bigger thing is Atheist Community of Austin. So while the website's a mess now, we're working to revitalize or revamp it. atheist-community.org and atheist-experience.com. I'm really bad at the social medias and the self-marketing. It's funny because this is now actually my job, but I got so much stuff going on, and all I really care about is getting another conversation out, getting another video out, and not as much about the cult of personality of, where can I go to find out everything Matt's doing? I don't think you want to know everything that Matt's doing, but I'm happy to share as much as I can. So Facebook's probably the preferred place right now.
That's awesome. Check him out on the Atheist Experience. He's part of the Atheist Community of Austin. And thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime.
If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that a look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job, so unfortunately I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.